Well, with that, I'm going to hand it over to County Commissioner Jasmine Beach-Ferrara, who has kindly offered to join us today and share her thoughts about working towards universal pre-K in Buncombe. Thanks, Jasmine.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, I'll say hi, Rocio. I'm so glad you're here and that we're able to offer interpretation, translation as part of this. It's so wonderful to see you all. I can't wait till we can do things like this in person and give big hugs and fist bumps. But until then, this is really nice too. And thank you for the invitation. My hope today is to share some updates from the Buncombe County government perspective of this really critical community conversation. And also to make sure there's some time for questions, excuse me, before I need to stop at 3. I'm also going to say you're probably going to meet my 6-year-old, Calvin. We're here at the house. He just finished up virtual school, so he will probably pop in at some point, as he often does when I'm on calls. So let me just begin by just saying a really tremendous and heartfelt thank you to each and every one of you. And there's really 2 layers to that gratitude. The first is that you all are just doing extraordinary work on the front lines of early childhood education and at the level of advocacy to serve children and families during this really protracted crisis that we're all in the midst of. And if we think it's hard as is, doing this without early childhood education would be impossible for our community. So, I just want to kind of name that and say thank you. And I know no part of this has been simple or easy. And that I think our community has risen to this moment in so many ways, including in the work happening in the sector. And then the other thank you is the evergreen thank you for being champions and advocates and real heroes around this issue for decades and decades and decades. It's been my experience in working at the level of organizing and advocacy and politics and campaigns that it is those decades of work that sometimes coalesce into those moments of real possibility. And that's where I think we are as a community. I think we're at one of those sort of sweet spot moments that you can't get to it without the decades of hard work. And you also just can't will it into being. But it's one of those moments where you've just got the alignment of community need, community support across sort of every walk of life, political will, and cross-sectoral engagement that can help move the needle in the kind of significant and ambitious ways that we need to in terms to really serve our children in the first 2,000 days of their lives and in the years before they head into the K-12 experience. And in doing that, serve our families and the economy and community that we're all part of. So I was hoping today just to share some updates from the level of County Commission and the Early Child Education and Development Committee at Buncombe County, which is really the body that holds this work. And I want to thank, we have a number of our members and a number of our regular attendees here as well. So thank you all for that service. So share some of those updates about where we are, where we're headed next, and hopefully contextualize that in a way that makes it feel really clear and accessible, and then just leave some time for questions and comments if that sounds like a good progression. Where we are, just so you're going to keep hearing me say this, where we are is a place I'm really excited about. Just to rewind a little bit, starting in 2017, we had a sort of new cohort of commissioners, and among that group, myself, Al Whitesides, and Robert Presley, all had a particular passion around early childhood education. And one of the first questions we brought forth of having been newly elected was, how do we really start to get serious about this issue? How do we start supporting our local providers to respond to the immediate needs that are there? But how do we also start to think about scaling up access to high quality early childhood education that is informed by conversations and work around racial justice and equity, economic justice and equity, and also knowing how many of our local families are experiencing and children are experiencing trauma in those early years. You all as a body were, of course, well into those questions at that point, and in the formal process of developing the report that became a really important part of the community conversation when it was published in 2017. And that report and y'all's willingness to share it and do a lot of educational work with us at the commission level, I really think helped orient that early stage of our work in the ways that I'm excited about and proud of what we've done in the 3 years since then. And that has involved the passage of a resolution which authorizes a base of 3.6 million in annual allocations that grows by 2% a year to support expansion of early child education and also upstream issues. And also the creation of this committee and the creation of this fund through which these local grants are allocated. Our thinking all along was to want to be responsive, obviously, to the decades and decades of data that show again and again how impactful pre-K in particular, quality pre-K in particular, can be in the lives of children in the short and long term. But also to respond to what we heard from you all in your report, which was, yes, that is absolutely true. And if we focus only on expanding pre-K slots without thinking of the totality of the early child education system, but especially the totality of children's lives, from the time they're in utero to the day they're born to what happens in the first 100, 200, and 2,000 days of their lives. And also thinking about the totality of the system in the sense of workforce development and retention issues, professional development opportunities, we're going to miss an opportunity to do a better version of this work. And that ethos really informed the way that we have approached the first 2 years of this funding and grant making at the county, which has been to take a more generalist approach. We've wanted to ask the question to local providers, both large and small, what do you need? What do you know your children and families need? What do you dream of? What would help you do your work in the way you wish you could do it? And that's really the set of questions we've been trying to respond to. And as many of you know, whether you're grantees or you've watched this work, it's led to a portfolio of grants that reflects a wide diversity of things. It's everything from creating new classrooms to having behavioral health specialists who have a trauma background, to being able to increase pay for teachers to get to the living wage threshold, to investing in folks pursuing degrees that will enable them to begin climbing the career ladder. It's been the totality of this. And I think I have felt like that's been a very good, strong foundation for this work. One way to think about it, I think, is that, folks in the sector are operating without enough resources, and doing extraordinary work without enough resources. And one of the first things we need to do is to try to get enough resources in the room. We can't do that with 3.6 million a year. It's not enough, but it's a movement in that direction. And to ask a system to scale that has been operating from a deficit position in terms of not having resources isn't a fair thing to put on the table. And I think that the very specific question we're asking here in Buncombe County is, how do we develop a long-term vision for scaling access to quality pre-K that's equity informed, that our system can grow into, less than the question of how do we apply a formulaic strategy that may have worked really well in a DC or a New York City or a Durham County or Met County, and more how do we learn from those best practice models and develop and build something together here that will serve our children in the best ways possible. And that's really where we're at right now, one is starting to move from this more generalist approach into an approach at the level of how is Buncombe County government approaching its role as one player in the mix and one funder in the mix, and how do we really start to elevate and prioritize the goal of expanding access to quality pre-K, not to the exclusion of the other goals and priorities that are related to some of those upstream issues, but as a strategy that we know can have a particular impact. And in that, the natural place to go in that conversation is, how do we get to universal pre-K in Buncombe County? And for us, what role can Buncombe County government play in helping to support that process, elevate that process, fund that process, and hopefully accelerate that process? So that's really the set of questions that we are now discussing at the commission level and at the committee level. I'll talk in a moment about some more concrete things, and then would just love to open it up for questions and discussion for the last part of time we have together. So concretely, what that means is that the commission has asked the committee to basically develop a set of recommendations that should inform the way the county government moves forward in its work on this issue. So our committee has formed an ad hoc working group that some of you are part of, others of you are already in discussion with, that will basically bring forth a set of recommendations in June to the full Board of Commission. The vision here is not that this ad hoc working group will bring forth a fully baked, finished cake. It's more that it will bring forth a set of values, guide stars, best practice recommendations, and a clearly articulated sense of, as we begin to work in more serious ways on supporting the expansion of pre-K, what should be front and center and not negotiable for us. Now, I know there's a lot of very specific and technical questions that come up as soon as you start throwing some of these phrases around. Especially for folks who work in the field day in and day out, I'm sure that's one of the first things you're thinking about. Well, what do you mean by universal pre-K? What is this? Those are great and important questions and will absolutely be part of the conversations moving forward. And those are questions where we'll need our very best minds and people with lived experience and impacted folks talking together to say, well, we do need to get to some decision points. What are we talking about here? I'm coming just as an individual level. When I say universal pre-K, which I will be using a lot in public spaces. So I just want to let you know what I mean when those words come out of my mouth. What I mean is that if there's a family in Buncombe County that would like to enroll their child in a pre-K program, they would be able to do that. And that we would pay and when I say equity informed pre-K, what I mean is we will be centering the question of how do we develop every aspect of this program in a way that centers and responds to what we know to be specific needs around racial justice issues, racial equity issues, specifically responsive to the needs of Black and Brown families in our community. Not where we build something and then try to retrofit an equity analysis to the side of it. What I mean is, from day one, this is a model pre-K where we are saying, we know that if you are Black in Buncombe County, every phase of your life will be marked by disparity, more likely or not. And we want to create a pre-K model that helps to change that story, working in partnership with children, with families. And that's a guiding principle from day one. So that's what I mean when I say universal pre-K, when I say equity informed, just to provide a little bit of clarity on that. So jumping back to where I was in terms of timeline and process, what will happen in June is we'll get this formal basically report out from the Early Childhood Education Committee. That will have been informed by conversations with probably all of you in one way or another. And at that point, there will really be a handoff. And it will move to the commission level and to sort of county staff level, and then ongoing conversation and dialogue, obviously with key community stakeholders and with the committee. But the question at that point will be, how does the county government move forward with a set of recommendations? And we'll enter into basically a planning period around that dovetails with the implementation of our new strategic plan. Priorities around early childhood education are woven through every element of that strategic plan, in my opinion. In some cases, it's very explicit. For instance, goals around kindergarten readiness and third grade literacy. In other places, I see it right there, even though it might not be quite as explicitly expressed. But when we think about having a healthy, vibrant community, that means kids who've had access to pre-K and become adults who get to have lives that have been shaped in that way. So all this to say that this really dovetails in important ways with all the work the county's government is doing right now to implement the strategic plan. And very concretely, our hope would be that the first phase of that planning process would be reflected in the grant RFP that opens up in December of 2021. Meaning by December of 2021, the grant application that opens up will look different than it does now. The one that many of you just submitted, thank you. I can't wait to start reading them. And will reflect this orientation towards elevating the expansion of pre-K as a priority. So we will know a lot more at every step of this process, and certainly by late fall of 2021 about the direction that we're headed in. And I can't reiterate enough how much collaboration is not just a core value of this, but it's really a non-negotiable. This doesn't work without collaboration, right? Like, and it doesn't work without cross-sector collaboration, without y'all at the table and helping to lead the conversation and making sure it's informed by best practices and a real understanding of the sector and what we think could work locally. It doesn't work without the participation of philanthropic partners. It doesn't work without the participation of corporate partners, both small businesses and hopefully some larger corporations. And we see our role as a local government agency as being a partner at the table who can play a range of roles. We hope that this money that the county is moving, 3.6 a year, it's not nothing. It's not enough to fund this. We know that. We know we need north of 20 million annually to do this, but it's year in and year out, right? So by July of this year, we will have funded over $10 million in the past 3 years towards early child education in Buncombe County. And it's also committed money. That resolution passed, it would need to be undone as a political step for that funding to stop, revised or undone for that funding to change or stop. And part of our hope in that was very intentional, and we've talked about this from the start, which is we want people in Buncombe County, but also people outside of Buncombe County at the state level and funders at the national level, people who pay attention to this, to know that this is a top priority in our community, and that we want Buncombe County to be a place where children have every opportunity to thrive and an equal opportunity to thrive. And we believe early child education and specifically access to pre-K are critical pieces of how we live into that value. So with that, I'll stop. And I hope this has kind of provided some additional context about where we are right now, where we're headed, and where we've been is informing all of that. And I'd love to respond to any questions or comments. And then we'll obviously look forward to staying in close touch as all of these conversations keep progressing.
That's a lot to take in, but please, if you've got questions, speak up.
I just have a comment that it's Marcia with Werner. It is just such a joy to be part of a community that not only values early childhood education, but is investing in it in so many intentional and strategic ways. So thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, all the county commissioners. Thank you, Rachel, all who are involved in implementing this at the county level. It's beautiful, and it's especially in these times when so much around us is so challenging. It's lovely that there's smart strategic thinking for the long term that is already bettering our community and will continue to. So thank you for your work.
Thanks, Marcia. And let me take this opportunity. I know everyone knows Rachel Nygaard, but none of this work would have come to fruition without Rachel's just absolutely tireless work and attention to process and detail and moving us from, we get to talk about these things. Rachel is in the role of making them real. So thank you, Rachel, for that leadership, and many other county staff members as well.
Jasmine, I have a question, Chuck Rosenblum. The comment that you made near the end, I thought you said we'll have 10 million by the end of the year. Is that what you said?
Yes. And what I meant was that at 3.6 now, 3.7 a million a year, by year 3 of distributing that, we will be over the mark, the $10 million mark cumulatively.
And how much of that has been earmarked and how much of that has been spent?
Well, we've now issued 2 years of grants at about 3.6, 3.7 million each in years 1 and 2. So that's 7.2, 7.3 million, I think, has gone out the door in the past 2 years. And then a little more than 3.7 million will be dispersed in grants this summer.
And you said we need about 20 million total. Would that be just adding the 3 not each year, or is that an addition?
I'm sorry. I was maybe moving a little fast and loose there with big numbers. So I'm referring to the number that was in the report that y'all produced that sort of estimated at that point that if we were to achieve the goal of universal pre-K under the model y'all envisioned in that report, the annual price tag would be approximately $20 million. So another way to put that is, if that model is where we end up heading and those estimates hold, of that 20 million, we've got 3.7 million accomplished right now in our
Thank you.
thermometer, so to speak.
That clarifies it. Thank you.
I just want to take 1 second. Hey, Jasmine, it's Betsy Russell. And just take a minute and issue a great deal of thanks to all of you who have been in here in this work since 2015 or whenever it started. This is exactly where we hope to be. And I just couldn't be more proud of this group, and the county was part of it from the start. So I much thanks there too, but really I'm looking at all these faces on this call that have stuck with it, and it's just great to be having this conversation. So thank you.
It looks like Henny has a hand up. Henny, did you want to say something? And
Sí, muchas gracias.
Yes, thank you so much. I hope that everybody has their channel on in English. Thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you to everybody. I am Jenny Hernandez from Poder Emma, and thank you, Jasmine, for all of this information. I want to thank this space, and also I want to make sure that we can open other channels that lead to conversations around places where we are right now with women who provide education and care to children in the community in Emma. I know that this is a big path, and you have already opened the door, and we are right there, and we are grateful. But I also know that there's much more to do and much more to walk. I know this is not the space to begin this conversation, but I would like to have this conversation at some point soon. We have received so much support from the Buncombe County Partnership for Children, especially Amy. And we have also gotten a lot of support from Rachel. Thank you, Rachel. But we still need to continue this. And having you here is so inspiring to me, because you are opening that door. And there are special conditions for these people who are doing this type of education, even through the pandemic. And so I would like for us to continue opening these channels to be able to create this that we are doing, which is equity. Equity for the people who do this work and the children in the community as well. So thank you so much.
Well said. Same.
Jasmine, John.
One second. Henny, gracias. And I apologize. I think I missed an opportunity to click into translation mode, so maybe I could hear from Rocio at another time, a little more detailed. I was able to follow a little bit, but thank you so much for the work, the critical work you're doing in Emma, and it's so important and such an important part of how we move forward as a community.
Jasmine, John DeWitt here.
Hey, John, sorry, I'm like, the sun is shifting.
Yeah, I know. You look, half of your face is lit up. The other.
Okay, there we go.
Just a question. I'm trying to follow what you were saying in terms of the mechanics of this operation. In terms of how do you see the partnership being involved? Are you setting up a committee of your commission, and we'll be part of that committee, or I mean, we've got 30 people sitting here ready to do something, and I'm just trying to, sitting at home for a year now, I'm ready to do something.
Right, yeah.
So I guess can you give us some guidance? Are you setting up a committee, and are we working with that committee? Are we setting up a committee to help you with your committee? Or
yeah.
Could you be a little more specific
Great question.
so I get some closure?
Yes, great question. And and also, when I sign off, Rachel will be able to stay on, and Rachel is really, again, working on the implementation of all this. I'm sorry, I can't figure out what's going on with the light in the late afternoon sun, but I'm here. So John, what I was saying was the Early Childhood Education Development Committee at the county now has an ad hoc working group that will work on the set of recommendations, and they will do so very much by engaging in dialogue with stakeholders like y'all. And I believe some of those conversations are already underway between county staff and the partnership and now this group around that critical question of sort of what are some of the key guide stars and values and non-negotiables that we really need to think about that will inform the way we move forward. So between now and June, when those recommendations go forward to the county commission, I think and hope there'll be lots of opportunities for input and engagement on that. And then after June, and as we move through the summer and fall, the county's planning process will be underway. That will be led by county staff, but obviously there'll be more people at the table, including key stakeholders and folks with issue area expertise in our community, potentially folks from other communities who are maybe a few years ahead of us in this and have some real lessons learned. So there'll be lots of input opportunities along the way, and we're also very action oriented. We want this to be the first phase of this to be reflected in the RFP that opens up in December, so that funding can come online by summer of 2022, that we begin to bring some of these strategies to life. And with that, I need to sign off right now. Calvin has a play date that is a non-negotiable in his life. So I really appreciate the time with all of you, the work you're doing, and we'll follow up with Rachel to get some updates, but I know I'll get to talk with many of you soon. Thank you all so much. And gracias. Thank you for your time. Wonderful to be with you today. And everyone stay well, stay healthy, stay warm as this ice storm hits us. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you,
very
Jasmine.
much.
Thanks for paying attention to the priorities of early childhood on the home front and for our community.
Yeah, it starts there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, bye.